It's wonderful to be back for this second Dharma talk. I will try to return at the end of the retreat for the go-around and the last part. But for now, let us continue our practice together. A very practical matter for those who may be having difficulty getting settled in the practice. It may be helpful to help your mind and your body, in a sense, get settled before you start sitting. For example, I often notice people in a weekly Zazen gathering or at a retreat at a certain time, sitting down and I'm going to do Zazen now. And of course, all they're doing is bringing their busy mind with them. And then they hurry up, sit down at this time, and they have 100 things on their mind. Well, this is not good Zazen. What if you took 5 or 10 minutes before you did Zazen and did the things that need to be done? For example, write down a note to yourself. Tomorrow you need to contact somebody. Maybe you need to think through something about work, family situation. Well, do that. I would also suggest taking a few minutes, I do it myself, to do some stretching before you sit so that your body is limber and ready for the Zazen, rather than just rushing in and sitting down. Neither the body nor the mind are really ready. So if you take 5 minutes or so to do this kind of preparation beforehand, your Zazen may be 5 minutes shorter, but it will be much better Zazen. It will be true Zazen. So consider this as you rush. I understand well, I know myself, in our busy lives to try to keep up a schedule and a routine, but take time to do it correctly, to do it properly. To return now to the Dharma talk, fortunately, 2 people did take up my what I mentioned. If you have something you would like me to raise in the Dharma talk, please send me a message and I will do my best. I received 2 requests, and they're actually intimately related, so it's very easy to take them up. And I'm sure they're not just the question of 1 or 2 people. The first question was the person mentioned that some time ago, I suppose it was in a one-on-one with them, I had mentioned that they need to accept themselves. And the person found this helpful, but also was surprised at how difficult it was to truly accept themselves. And they asked if I could say something about that. To truly accept ourselves as we are is not an easy thing. To say we do is easy, but actually in our day-to-day life, not just to accept, for example, what we may do, bad things, mistakes, and so on, things that we do or have done, or things that we didn't do, the sin of omission, as it's called in some faith. Or we may have deep regrets about something we did or failed to do. But there's also perhaps the deeper question of accepting what is and what is not. In other words, accepting in a deeper sense what we really are and what we are not. So very simply, it's not just a matter of actions, things that we may have done or not done, but also about, in a deeper sense, our very being, what we are and what we are not. So this is a deep question, a deep concern, in a sense, I suppose, for all human beings. How do we truly accept ourselves? In a sense, it is a question for the self. It is a question of the self. It is a question that shows clearly the self is not at rest. It is, in a sense, a symptom, a sign of the dis-ease, this very question. And yet it is a deep one, isn't it? I like very much the Protestant theologian Paul Tillich's very precise, concise expression of what he considered the essence of his faith. As he put it, to accept that you are accepted. And he means by God as a Christian. To accept that you are accepted. I take this to mean, very simply, God is there, if we speak of God in the Christian faith, and I have no trouble. God is there waiting for us. He is not putting the conditions on us. And certainly as a God of love, perhaps not as a God of vengeance or something like that, anger, but as a God of love. God is not putting conditions on us. He's not keeping the door closed. We are. We are putting the conditions on. And you might say grace, the actual experience of grace, is realizing that that door, if it was closed from your side, not from God's side. The door was always open, but we were pushing it shut, perhaps. So again, in a Christian context, to accept that you are accepted, to be more precise, even though you may be unacceptable to yourself. But you are already accepted by God, even though you may find certain things unbearable, unacceptable about yourself, things that you have done or what you are. Yes, but you are accepted by God. In Buddhism and in Zen, it's not the same. In a sense, the problem of God is not a problem. That's not the issue. The issue is the immediate question of our own dis-ease. So naturally, the approach, the way that we deal with these things, it's not the same. And yet, I find it very, very encouraging, enlightening to savor how the Christian faith does deal with this. Well, how do we do it in Zen? Well, I would say all genuine faiths, Buddhism, Christianity, any genuine spiritual religious practice demands true humility, humbleness, a true giving of ourselves, and a true acceptance of ourselves. Practically speaking, any genuine spiritual path, I believe, also requires patience. Patience. I struggled with that one for a long time. And yet, the Judeo-Christian Islamic monotheistic faith is not the same as Buddhism or Zen, naturally. To accept ourselves, the need, to feel that need to be accepted. This is a profound concern for the self. But again, Is it not also a symptom, a sign of the dis-ease of the self? The very need to be accepted by what? For what? Who is setting up the conditions? Do you see? I would savor this profound difference in Buddhism and in Christianity. I wouldn't put one above or below the other, but to savor that. The second question that was raised by another person is profoundly related. It was the question of the last words of Jesus on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? This became a kind of a koan for this person who grew up in a Christian faith. And this person struggled with it for a long time, trying to believe that they were not forsaken, or that maybe they were forsaken, but then there was this and then back and forth, struggled for a long time. Self must be forsaken. Without this, there is no spiritual path. There is no religious path. There is no going beyond the self. Face it. We're not just talking about Jesus, the Christ on the cross. Each and every one of us, the self must be forsaken. Do you see? In the Christian faith, this is absolutely necessary. God had to, in a sense, if we speak in Christian terms, forsake Jesus on the cross. And if you really see it through, you see that that is the love of God. That is great compassion in work. To forsake right there at that limit. Why have you forsaken me? I need forgiveness. I need salvation. Please give me something. Nothing. Nothing. Oh, but what a marvelous nothing that is once the self truly is forsaken. It must of necessity. Again, this is the essence of any genuine spiritual path, I would say. We must forsake ourselves. To put it in Christian terms, yes, we must die on the cross with Christ. Buddhism, we don't speak of it that way, but it comes down to the same thing. Zen Buddhism speaks of dying the great death, then you are reborn in the great life. The words are different a little bit, but it's pointing this to the same essential point of any, I would say, any genuine spiritual path. Here you see the danger of the Kensho experience, having some kind of experience where the self, in a sense, transcends itself for a moment and then comes back to itself, now with the sense that it has had an experience in which it was gone, perhaps. And yet that experience itself lasts for hours, days, perhaps weeks, or even months. But then I've seen it time and time and time again. Many of you present here, you have an experience, everything's clear, Buddha nature, and for a while, and then the confusion comes up again. The roots have not been cut. The roots have not been cut. It's clear. The Kensho experience can itself become a part of the disease. It must be thoroughgoing. Here, Christianity, I think, is just as clear as Buddhism and Zen. Meister Eckhart, the great German mystic, spoke of, if we still have a place within our soul where God can enter, we are not yet truly poor. And he meant poor in a very, very good sense, as having and being not one thing. Again, this, I would say, is the essence of spiritual practice, and it's not limited to Buddhism or Zen. My God, why have you forsaken me? God had to. No, better yet, you have to. You must forsake yourself. Then the work is done. The real work begins. The great joy, the consummation, if I use that word, of spiritual love, of great compassion is there when this self is forsaken. This is the marvel of genuine spiritual practice, I would say. This is the miracle, the extraordinarily ordinary miracle of spiritual practice. Giving all of ourselves, that's the way I prefer to put it. Giving all of ourselves. The marvel of life is manifest. Then to spend our lives refining, deepening, maturing this great compassion, which in a sense doesn't need to be, yes, it doesn't need to be refined or matured. And yet, perhaps we could use a little work. So to spend our life happily, humbly, deepening, refining, maturing this great compassion, which is great wisdom as well. Two sides of the same coin. Is this the way? And I don't mean Zen Buddhist practice, put on your rakusu and sit zazen. I mean this fundamental spiritual practice, realizing that we must forsake ourselves, give ourselves up in the best sense of the term, to live truly. We must. When you see this is the way you must go, let us walk that way together. Please feel free to stand up and stretch for a moment.
So if anybody has a question, you can either just unmute and ask it, or raise your physical hand, or raise your Zoom hand. We are having one or two very minor glitches with the signal, Jeff, but so far we've everything has come through okay. But if we miss something substantial, I may ask you to repeat it.
Yeah. Don't worry, I didn't say anything important. So.
Okay. So any questions? Edward, if you unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jeff. As always, I have too many questions. So if nobody else has.
One, Edward, please get it down to one.
First of all, thank you very much for what you just said, because I found it extremely helpful and inspiring. And I can translate that selflessness to my life off the mat, so to speak. Well, sometimes I find it difficult to connect the idea of going beyond the self and doing Zazen. Can you please say something about that?
What is Zazen, Edward, other than going beyond, if I use that word, as you put it, going beyond the self, or before self has arisen? Isn't that what Zazen is? I don't mean.
I sometimes feel. Sorry.
I don't mean the idea.
No, I mean the practice. on sitting down, sometimes I'm struggling to get to this point. I think we sort of discussed that last week as well.
Where are you trying to get to again, Edward?
Not to see it as in something I am doing about myself, to myself, or with myself.
And isn't that precisely what you're doing?
Well, it's very helpful to do it within a Shanga, because then
I
I'm
mean, you're actually making the mistake you're trying not to make by trying not to make that mistake. When you give all of yourself, where is there room for all of that? A lot going on in the mind there, isn't it? It's so much simpler. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Once again, where are you trying to get to? You're up to your eyeballs in it, as we say in American English, and you want to get where? Sorry, I forget. Where did you want to get to? Bigger, better, calmer, clearer? This is all crap that your mind brings up, isn't it? Isn't it? You might want to drop it. Perhaps that's what Zazen is. Do you know what I mean? It's so much simpler than what you're doing. Would you like to say anything else, Edward? Again, this is not just your question.
no, that's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you for raising it.
All right, I think Jenny, have you got your hand up there?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I have a question. Thank you, Jeff. I found actually what you said really touched me very deeply, because it's almost where I feel, in a way, what I struggle with, which is accepting oneself, forgiving oneself, I think as well, is very important for me. But it's the being sure that I'm not kind of being tricked by the self, put it that way, that I really have accepted, and I'm able to accept what I have seen, I would say, through the eye of the self, as shortcomings, where I've fallen down or where I've let myself down. Are there, I don't know, are there signs, or is there something that could give one a clearer understanding that it's not a trick of the self, in a way, trying to waylay? I don't know if I've explained that clearly enough.
Yeah, it's good to, in a sense, to be critical and to dare to ask, wait a minute, is this real? Let me test it. One thing I found very helpful is to do precisely that, to test it. Because what you'll find is, if you've had an experience where you feel that, yes, I can now accept it, don't be afraid to test it. Because what I found is, if it's real, the more you test it, the clearer it becomes. That testing itself is helpful. That's a kind of refining, you see? If it's real, test it. Test it in your life, test it when you feel frustrated. What happened to that acceptance? Huh? Wait a minute. There's the real dojo, the real place of practice. Don't be afraid, you're right, to test it. And if it's real, it will just become clear. You will be able to humbly accept that failing. It doesn't mean, oh, now everything's okay. No. Now you can really work on those shortcomings. That's why humility, true humbleness it's essential. How could it not be there? But to be able to say, I need to keep my eye open. I need to keep my eye open. Yeah. That not the discursive mind, but the third eye. Wait a minute. Is it real? Is it real? Test it throughout the day, throughout the night, and you'll see. If it becomes clear, continue on. If it falls apart, well, the sooner you throw it away, the better. So again, don't be afraid to test it, but I don't mean just with your discursive mind, well, it could be this and it could be that. That's just distraction. To genuinely, right, as you're doing, ask into the depths of yourself, is this real? How did you put it? Am I fooling myself?
Am I fooling myself? Yeah. Am I being tricked by the self almost?
Well, are you tricking yourself? Yeah. Am I deluding myself? Is this a delusion? That's a good thing to keep whenever you feel you've let go of your delusions. Okay, good. Keep your eye on it. Test it. Test it. Don't be afraid to test it. See, often people are afraid because they think, oh no, I made this beautiful little, right, Buddha doll here, and don't crack my Buddha doll. But if it can be cracked, crack it.
Okay.
And again, that acceptance, the Bernadette Roberts, who you know well, the Catholic contemplative, I think she would go so far as to say, we must get to the point where we do not even need to be, where we have dropped the very need to be accepted. And this is not arrogance, hubris, spiritual pride at all. It's the complete opposite. You see? It's not pride at all. Again, as a Catholic contemplative, I believe she would say, we must get to the point where we do not need to be forgiven. The very need to be forgiven is gone. Again, this is not arrogance. This is not spiritual pride at all. It's the opposite. You see that, don't you? Keep that.
I'm starting to.
Keep that single eye open.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything else?
No. I think that's something I've got to work on. Thank you. Yeah.
Could I just carry on from that? Because a lot of struggle with acceptance is to do with accepting that we failed or things have gone wrong and so on. But in my experience, there's another side to it as well. Actually quite an important side. And that's accepting actually that we do have that goodness within us as well. That warmth that is within every human being, and is accepting the whole, both sides, seems to be really significant.
As long as you don't use it to prop up the self. You know what I mean, Alan?
Now, perhaps you could explain that a little more.
You're right. There are two sides. There must be, if we speak of acceptance, to really be able to, first of all, humbly realize, acknowledge our faults, our weaknesses, our mistakes. Right? This is essential on the spiritual path. And part of the value of what you're saying, I think, is we have to be wary not to just fall into a kind of despair or hopelessness. Huh? That's not what it means to be truly forsaken, is it? You follow?
Mhm.
That's when the self is still holding on to itself, you see? It has some awareness of its own weakness, shortcomings, and so on, but it's still holding on to itself. Then despair is possible, perhaps inevitable. You follow?
Yeah.
Then the practice perhaps becomes weakened or impossible. We humbly quote that.
I didn't quite catch that. It didn't come through.
Oh, yeah, it says my internet connection is unstable. Huh? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we're good now.
Okay. Endless delusions, let go. Huh? Endless delusions. In a way, it's essential to realize the depth of our delusion. Precisely because through that, I would say that's how we really open up to what you're talking about. That boundless, did you say hope? Even more than hope, but the light, the light that comes from that utter darkness, the light that cannot be stained. That's what you're talking about, correct, Alan?
Yes, I described it as a warmth of heart.
Yes, yes, yes. The true love and warmth I don't think it can come from a heart that has not plumbed the depths of its own misery. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I think, yes, it has to be seen all the way through.
Yeah, yeah. And my teacher's teacher, Shibayama, used to quote, he didn't know where it came from, but I did a little homework with some German friends, and it looks like Goethe, in one of his writings, speaks of, unless you get to the point where you cannot even swallow a crumb, a bread crumb, you are so full of your own awareness of your own weakness that you cannot even swallow a morsel of bread. The grace of God will never reach you. Interesting that a Zen master quoted that, isn't it? Would you like to say anything more, Alan?
No, I think we've covered it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
bringing that up. Huh?
Would anybody else like to ask a question? As Jeff has already said, if you have a question, there will be others who have the same question, so it can be helpful.
I want to say something.
Wonderful.
I struggle so much with my emotions, and yeah, then it's sometimes difficult in my life because people got confronted with it. Yeah. Also in the zazen, I also just have to cry, but it's so much that it just doesn't stop.
You can see through your way if you can give yourself fully to the zazen, but practically speaking, you may want to talk with someone about these emotions, address it on that level. and see what needs to be done, and then give yourself to the Zazen. Maybe there's some things that you need to work through emotionally. This is no less important than the spiritual path. They're not two different paths, but for practical reasons, they can be discerned, they can be separated at times. For example, to know I need to deal with these emotional issues that are coming up so powerfully. I remember well myself, and I remember ignoring them, just giving myself to the practice, because then after all, that's a psychological issue. But after a while, as I often mention, it comes back and it bites you in the butt, as we say. You realize, wait a minute, I have to look at that stuff. It's still there. It's still playing itself out in my mind. It's still affecting the way I deal with other people, for example. So those emotional conflicts, whatever, why don't you deal with them directly? Maybe talk with someone, discuss it with someone who can help you with that.
Yeah.
And then maybe you will be able to give yourself to the practice in a way that can support, be a kind of a synergy, you know what I mean? As you open up to your emotions, the practice naturally becomes deeper. It's not a conflict anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, powerful, I know. I know well, sitting there really deeply in Zazen, and then all of a sudden it seems maybe from out of nowhere, where did that come from? But
Yeah.
when it comes several times, it becomes clear, wait a minute, no, this is not something just to, it's not real, all things are Buddha nature bullshit. No, I got to deal with this.
Yeah.
I have to deal with this. Deal with it. Monique, is it?
Yeah.
Please deal with it. Okay. I'm not a therapist, so I don't want to step in and speak. It's not my job. But I can tell you, I've been through deep emotional stuff too. And if you can really be settled in the Zazen, often you can just let it come all the way and then let it go all the way. And it doesn't come back, but you're saying it comes back. So obviously something else needs to be done. But if you can get to the point where you can just let it come, not analyze it or judge it, just let it come in all its fury. And then let it go. It doesn't come back again. And again, it may end up, you realize it's gone, but also I need to do something about this. I need to, as I often mention, I need to write a letter to someone and apologize or accept an apology or stop seeing this person or something like that. You follow? There may be something that needs to be done in the world. But this becomes clear in time. And it can be done through Zazen, but Zazen is not the answer to everything. Do what you need to do to open up to that stuff. Okay? Do you want to say anything else? Again, this is not just your issue. Believe me. Believe me. Do you want to say anything else?
I only have tears.
Huh?
I only have tears.
Well, I guess they will be tears of joy soon enough. Don't be afraid to cry. There's a time to cry and be deeply sad. But that's not the end. Okay? If anyone else would like to speak up, there are many people here who are much more experienced in these things than I am.
I haven't got a question or anything. I just want to say, Monique, that it takes a lot of courage to plumb the depths of yourself and find these places. So just keep going.
Thank you, Ross. Leonie, did you have your hand up?
Thank you very much, Jeff. I just wanted to respond. I couldn't see who it was that has just spoken, but I just wanted to share several years that I spent in Zazen with a great deal of difficulty, tears, and a very, very difficult set of things to have to process. There's 2 points I'd like to make, definitely to echo Jeff's point that Zazen does not fix everything, and that proper psychological care is very, very important. And secondly, that Zazen alongside good psychological care is a very, very useful thing to do, that our capacity to turn towards the things that we need to pay attention to and be with them fully really does, in my experience, change by a daily sitting practice. So I really encourage people who are struggling in that way to get good care, and that sitting to the extent that you're able to, not forcing yourself beyond any level of tolerance, is very useful. And just to re-echo that this requires great patience. It's not a one-hit wonder. This is a daily difficulty that can go on for several years, and it is really worth the effort of having good Zen teachers and also good therapists. So that is what I'd say. Patience, it's a difficult journey, and the combination of both things is very valuable.
Thank you. From a medical professional, which I am not. Thank you.
Ewald?
Yeah, hello, Jeff. I'm busy already since a while with this sentence, so it comes now and then, or often, into my mind, and it fits for me also to this scene with Jesus on the cross. It's about I hope I say it right in English. It's the sentence to endure the unsustainable. Is that understandable?
Endure the unendurable, huh?
Yeah, and maybe it's, I don't know if it's a mindfuck, but it's for me also like when I make Zazen, it's basically, it comes down to it. And what to say, the only thing the only answer to that I have is to go on sitting. Can you say something about it?
Yes, please, by all means, go on sitting. And there is a point in the practice where you need to endure the unendurable, to go through what it seems unbearable, impossible to go through. But it's not a matter of willpower. It's not willpower. Willpower is what makes it unbearable, pushing against something. When, and I'm sure you've touched this, Ewald, huh? As you go deep in the practice, you see that the apparent conflict, confrontation, what you are pushing against is not separate from you, is it? And when you really give all of yourself, endure the unendurable, that just feels a little too willful to me. There's a point where the will itself is let go and how to say it, the universe itself takes over. And then there is no opposing position. The self cannot help but oppose itself. That's what it is. You know what I mean, Evelyn? That's the difficulty of the practice. But when we give all of ourselves, there is a, how to say, a turn, a transformation in the practice, where we realize we're not forever trying to go to it, toward it, to get, to improve, to get closer, returning to the first question today. But rather, we find ourselves coming from it. This is not enduring the unendurable. You follow?
Yes, I'm trying.
It's a minor difference, but it's the difference between heaven and earth.
Yeah.
But yes, continue practicing with patience and with humbleness. You don't need another thing.
Okay.